You've set up your enterprise, you've written a beautiful opening statement, and then the reality hits. You need money. And this is not a vague, we need a few quid. This is how are we going to bring in 50,000 in your first year. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a simple funding plan to be able to start your first year as a CIC or community enterprise, which includes an example plan of earning your first £50,000. Hello, I'm Philippa Bonham. I've spent the last 15 years or so supporting community interest companies, businesses and social enterprises to start up, launch and grow. Raise funding from tiny grassroots to multi-million pound organisations. If you're a new or an early stage founder, or you're just thinking about starting up in business or a community venture and you want clear guidance without all the over-exaggeration, hit subscribe. This channel is for you. 2 quick things before we dive in. This is not a promise that every organisation will raise 50,000 in their first year. It's a framework to help you develop a plan, think clearly and avoid mistakes as you go. I'm going to show you a sample funding mix, which is a blend of grants, of trading income, community fundraising and using local partners to bring in an income. I'll give you a rough quarter by quarter plan, and this is suitable for community interest companies, social enterprises. I like to have a structured approach to drive up income generation. Everyone needs some form of income, so keep listening. By the end of this video, you will have a picture of how that first £50,000 might realistically be made. And it'll give you a sense of what to focus on in each part of the year. It will give you some ideas for your own venture. If that sounds useful, keep listening. Tap like so YouTube knows that it's useful to other founders and entrepreneurs just like you. So firstly, let's look at why you need a funding mix. When people start up, I often hear we just need one grant to keep us going, or we'll run some sessions and just see who funds us. And the most common is probably that we'll just work it out as we go. The reality is the first year, if you want to hit the ground running, your first year should have a mix of funding streams, not just one magic pot of money, unless you're incredibly lucky. If you rely on just one grant or just one contract or just one client, you are very vulnerable, particularly in the potential that it may be delayed or it may not happen at all. You may do lots of negotiation and then it doesn't happen. Instead, I want you to think of it in terms of a funding mix. So that is different streams working together, even if they start small. We're building solid foundations to make sure that your organisation becomes sustainable and it's strong and it lasts. Keep listening as I'll share various tips along the way that will really benefit you. So let's look at funding mix for the first year. I'll give you an example of how for a community interest company and how that might reach around 50,000 in the first year. So please don't treat this as a rigid recipe. It's an example to get you thinking. Each organisation, each person is unique in the journey that they are going to travel within their community interest company or their social enterprise. So this is something to give you to inspire your own plan. So let's look at the first year, and that might be roughly made up into several income generation streams. So say you have 25,000 from small grants. So that's 50% of your plan is focusing on small grants. £10,000 may come from trading income. You maybe have £10,000 from community fundraising and potentially individual donors or supporters. And then 5,000 from local partners or sponsors. So that's the example of where the 50k could come from. Stay with me and I'll show you how that can be broken down in more detail. A recipe for success. Let's start with small grants. If you're going to aim for 25,000 in small grants, when you first start up, it's highly unlikely that you will get a grant any bigger than 20,000 because you need to prove that you can do it. You need to prove not only that you can deliver the services or the products that you say you're going to deliver, but you also need to be able to manage those funds. So start small when you're new to this. It may be that you've got years of experience with an employer on managing grants, which is fine, but still you need to demonstrate your track record of a new organisation. So for this part, the small grants, I'm talking of grants of around 1,500 to 20,000. And that may come from local funders, it may come from community foundations, your nearest regional community foundation. It may come from your local authority, may have some startup grants. An example to make it more specific is you may have a grant of around 20,000 once you've got something to show, once you're set up properly, and that could cover you maybe overhead staff costs, core project costs, and maybe a few smaller grants from 1,500 up to about 5,000 each for specific activities, and that's where you start to prove your track record. You absolutely need to be prepared for funding. So that means you need to have clear aims. You need to have safeguarding policies in place. If that's relevant to your organisation, it probably will be if you're a community interest company or a social enterprise. You need to have basic policies. You will need to have DBS checks if you're working with children, young people or vulnerable adults. So you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have a perfect logo. You don't need to have a perfect website. You're not aiming for perfection at this point. You just need to have a presence and be funder ready, be fundable. So the second one is trading income. So if in our example, we're looking at £10,000 from trading income, and that will sit alongside your grants. And I love to see community interest companies, social enterprises bringing in that trading income in their first year. Sometimes it takes a lot longer to set up. Even if it starts slowly, start that trickling in. And I know it's different for charities because there are different laws on trading income depending on where you are in the world, and therefore trading income has to be done in a different way. But for social enterprises, this might be paid workshops or programs for schools or other organisations, might be consultancy or training based on your expertise. It may be low-cost community sessions when you charge just a nominal fee. So for example, you might run a weekly group where some places are funded by a grant and you deliver paid sessions for schools or partners using a similar model. So you're testing your offer at this stage. You're building relationships and you're not relying 100% on grants. In our example, we also talked about community fundraising and supporters and generating around £10,000. So this could include developing your own online fundraising page, such as Just Giving, Local Giving, Space Hive. It may be sponsored challenges or sponsored events, or you may be looking at regular supporters, so they may pay a monthly fee. And together these opportunities can build up so they trickle feed into your organisation. And that can easily add up to a few £1,000s a year, depending on how much effort you put into promoting that and promoting what you do. It works better if you plan ahead, if you plan strategically the year ahead and how you can tap into various campaigns to raise awareness and to encourage people to donate to your organisation. If you want some more information on that, then look at some of my other videos on income generation, and I talk about setting up your fundraising page and different ways of bringing in income. For local partnerships and sponsorships that we talked about for our example of about £5,000 a year, local businesses may sponsor a project that you're delivering or an event. Maybe a housing association or council might commission a small piece of work from you. Social value funds from private companies is worth looking into. Maybe some in-kind support. For example, use of a venue that's provided free to help reduce your costs. And even a couple of really modest sponsorships of maybe 1.5, 2,000 can really make a significant difference to your income. So these numbers are just illustrative. They're used as examples to give you ideas for what might work in your organisation. Your mix might be different, but I want you to see that 50k doesn't have to be one big terrifying grant, which you are highly unlikely to get in your first year. It can be a combination of realistic small chunks that you combine together. Now keep listening, because I'm going to put a bit more detail and show you how to do this. So let's turn that into a rough timeline for your first year. I was thinking quarters, maybe that's my part of my finance head, but it helps me to organise the year ahead if I break it up into the 4 quarters. And I know that not everyone has the same financial year, and I'll talk about year end and financial year in other videos. I've just done it as quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3 and quarter 4 to kind of break it down for you. In the first quarter of starting up or maybe revitalising your community interest company or your social enterprise, that first quarter is about getting the basics right. Not perfect, just right. You need to have a bank account. You need essential policies in place, so that as the basics, that would be probably safeguarding, data protection, health and safety, depending on what you're going for, maybe environmental policy. So the real basics. You don't have to have the full suite of policies that an established organisation has. You will build on that as you go. But for that first quarter, you need to have the basics. You need to have DBS checks in place if that is relevant for the work that you're doing. Whether that is a team that you have or just you need to make sure that you have those in place. You also need to have a clear description of what you do and who you help, and I've got other videos on that. It's all about your vision, mission and your core values. Once you've got that, again, it doesn't have to be perfect and it will potentially change as you develop and grow, but you need to have that. Is the first point in having your plan, so that must be done in the first quarter. And then in the first quarter you look at mapping across opportunities. That might be looking at local grants that are coming through and what the deadlines are. Any existing contacts who may pay for a pilot session or workshops, or individuals who love what you do already. So that might be running an arts workshop for local mums or an arts session for elderly people. Something that fits with what you want to do, so you can start to pilot your ideas. The other things you need to do in your first quarter is you need to start submitting your first small applications. So keep them focused, keep them realistic. Make sure they are aligned with what you want to do. Don't just chase the funding. So if the eligibility of that funding doesn't fit what you want to do, then don't try and mould it around it, because you just end up chasing the money. This is about your organisation, what it's here to do, who it's here to help, and you will find the funding to fit that organisation, not the other way around. So it might be that your local authority has some small startup grants, it may have some community grants. Check what your local authority offers in terms of support. This is a point where you'd get to know key contacts, particularly for startup and community capacity building. And you'll see I've got other videos on how to build your network and how you can apply for local authority contracts. So you should be aiming for at least one small grant of about £2,000. Ideally, you want to apply for 3 if you can, but obviously I don't know if you are doing this full-time, part-time. I don't know what your hours look like. Be realistic to yourself and apply for what you can. Bear in mind that it's very rare that funders will turn it round in a week or so. Give yourself 6 to 20 weeks for funding to come through. So you need to consider that. Some funders are even longer. But with the smaller grants, I like to think that they get them through reasonably quickly. And I would say the maximum for most grants would be 20 weeks, but a lot of them do it a lot quicker than that. Some have monthly funding panels, so you'll get a decision reasonably quickly. This first quarter is about building foundations and having the focus, but not perfection. So at this point, don't expect perfect. I know a lot of founders will spend a lot of time on getting it perfect, but at this point, it's not needed. You need it functional and fundable, and that's the basics. Quarter 2, this should be the point where you start to deliver. So you've used that quarter 1 as your planning stage, development stage, building the foundations. Quarter 2 is about delivering and building that evidence base to show what your organisation can do. So you may have a small funding pot by this point in which you need to start delivering, and you need to collect evidence as you go. Remember, you've got to track your funding. So whatever money comes in, you need to track it. You need to report on it. So that might be as simple as taking a few photos. Some funders will require either feedback or a funding report at the end of delivering your project. So you will need to keep track. For example, if you're running workshops, you'll need to have an attendance sheet so you know who's attended and how many have attended. So think about that as you're going along. It's good to collect case studies and stories. So as you meet people while you're delivering, collect their stories. Obviously, gain consent, ask for feedback so you know how it's going. At this point, you also need to be applying for funding. You've not just done that in quarter 1, then you have time to rest. You need to still be applying for other funds. Look at your local community foundation. You'll maybe think about applying for Awards for All from the National Lottery, and that can give you up to £20,000 in your first year. But again, bear in mind that Awards for All can have a waiting time from when you put your application in, when you submit your application, to when you get an agreement, which isn't guaranteed. You'll get feedback if you don't get the funding, but it can take about 16 weeks. So bear that in mind in your timeline. To apply for Awards for All, you need to be absolutely ready. So you must have your bank account in the name of your organisation. You must have at least 2 unrelated directors. And you must have relevant policies. And I've already mentioned that. And if you need more detail in my Mastering Not-for-Profit Launch and Grow course, it talks about all this in detail. It takes you through a step-by-step process. And I'll add the link in the description below. Remember to build your network. So use this second quarter to build your networks. Hopefully you already have some, but you can build networks both online and in person. Sponsors and funders are out there in the form of real people. So make it your superpower to find out who they are, who is the best network of contacts for you to develop and learn from to make your organisation a success. So in this quarter, you may pilot 1 or 2 projects. For example, a workshop package for a school or maybe a local employer. You may run a simple community fundraiser. It might be online or it might be a small event that you deliver. If you work with children and young people, you could potentially apply to deliver holiday activities. Local councils often have holiday activity programmes that you can get involved in, either as a partner or a lead supplier. If you work with disabled children, there are short break contracts with local authorities. And if you need more information on how to tender for local authority contracts, then have a look at my video on that. So the key thing is you're no longer just planning. You're delivering, you're learning. Even if you haven't secured funding or sponsorship yet, start to build your network and run some pilot projects so you can gain evidence. You can collect photo, video, and you can showcase what you do. By this point, you should have set up your social media. Just start with one channel which resonates best with your target audience. So for example, if it's young mums, then Instagram might be the best one. If it's an older age group, people in the 40s, 50s, then maybe Facebook is better. So analyse, or maybe Twitter. So analyse what is best for your target audience, not necessarily what you're most comfortable with. But if you can marry the two up, then that is better, obviously. If you're not comfortable with social media, you need to reconsider some of that plan. If you're supplying public sector, then potentially LinkedIn is a good social media platform. It's more formal, more professional, and you may prefer to work in that way. So you need to be on these platforms, and again, just choose one, don't overcomplicate it. Build a picture of what your organisation is, what it's doing, who you serve. Quarter 3 is where you start to see what's working, and you can grow your income and plan bigger bids. So this is a good time to explore any paid work that's gone well. Can you repeat it? Can you expand it? And start thinking about planning some larger bids for year 2. Now that you have evidence and outcomes, you could look at some of the bigger applications such as children in need, reaching communities, and maybe potentially lead as a holiday activity provider. But again, it depends what your venture is here to do and who it's here to serve. Build a more structured supporter income. Use this time to refine your fundraising page and add that to your social media campaigns to promote it. And rather than chasing every opportunity, focus down on what works, what you can do more of, what you want to do less of. And at this point, quarter 3 is a point where you are moving less from kind of scrambling around trying to find your feet to more strategic, more strategy related, because you've got some evidence on what works, you've got some evidence potentially on what doesn't work, and then you can help to move forward. So quarter 4 is where you start to really review, refine and prepare for year 2. So make sure you review where you are so far. Use this time to tidy up your systems and processes. You must develop systems for tracking income, tracking who your contacts are and how you can build on that, and reporting back to funders. You'll start to line up funding and trading opportunities for the next year. Remember, you should be looking back at what went well and what didn't go so well to refine for next year. So in my community interest company, we've explored working with children, young people and adults. And our success is working with young people. So we've refined what we do to have more of a focus on that area. This is what we enjoy doing, it's what we're good at, and it's much needed. And once you find what's working, that's where you put the effort in. So remember to build your fundraising strategy around this information. Look back over that first year and see where you've had the funding, what feedback you've had from funders if you weren't successful, what's waiting, and how you can build on that. Remember to use funding searches. There are some free ones and there are some paid for ones. And again, I've got other videos that talk about that. And once you develop that structure, you can build on it year on year. So ask yourself, which grants have come through so far and why? Which bits of paid work were sustainable, enjoyable, and why? Ask yourself how the community fundraising has gone. Where do you feel strong in that? Is there something you need to refine? Do the messages need to be clearer? And think about the timelines. What timelines do you need to consider? Are there certain national campaigns that you can tap into to help boost your awareness of your organisation, to then bring more opportunities in? So in more detail, here's an example of what your first year may look. Remember, nothing is guaranteed. I'm using these as an examples to spark your ideas. Your venture, your organisation is unique to what you want to do, what your aims and ambitions are. This will give you some inspiration to be able to make your organisation a success. So keep listening. Where do you get them from? Your small grants would be potentially local authority startup grants, awards for all, the National Lottery, and some community capacity building grants. Trading income, maybe sales of products, maybe online sales or merchandise, contracts with schools or consultancy work. Local partners or sponsorships may be like public service contracts or social value contracts with private sector. event sponsorship or monthly subscription. So there's different opportunities in there for you to earn an income and build a good income generating portfolio for your organisation. The guidance on common mistakes to avoid. Don't rely on one big dream grant because that rarely happens. If it doesn't land and you're stuck, build smaller, more realistic funding applications. Funding takes time, yes, I understand that. And due to the nature of funding, you can end up spending a lot of time on a funding application which gets nowhere. And it may be that you get through to stage 2, stage 3, and you think it's really going to happen, and then it falls flat and it doesn't. That is just the nature of funding, and sometimes that is about you haven't given enough information, or there was just another organisation that was slightly better than you, or sometimes, and this is so frustrating, it is about that fund is totally oversubscribed and you just didn't get there. It's like literally a lottery, and sometimes the lottery does work like that. So it can be frustrating, which is another reason for making sure you have a mixed portfolio of income generation opportunities. Another mistake is ignoring trading because we're a CIC. And the whole point of having a community interest company, which is the go between almost a halfway house between a private company and a charity, that means you can trade. And CICs should trade where it makes sense. Even a modest amount in year 1 starts to build that portfolio of income generation. Trading can be as big or as small as you like. Obviously, it depends a lot on your time and if you have a team on their time, because I know when you first start out, time is a major issue because you may be doing a full-time job or something else, caring duties in between trying to get your organisation set up. It may be that you start an online shop. You maybe have products, merchandise that you've designed yourself. And this is reasonably simple with various apps and websites. So Wix website, and you can have various plugins to be able to create your merchandise and sell it on. Don't go for random fundraising with no clear plan, because one sponsored walk here and one small event there, and then it might be that you've got nothing for months. So plan ahead. It's better to have small but simple and with a plan to stick to. By planning a year ahead, you can be strategic. You can potentially tap into national campaigns that help to make your cause stronger. You can be timely and you can be effective if you plan ahead. The other thing is failing to track. So keep a basic funding tracker so you know what you've applied for, when you've applied for it, and how much you've applied for. And it's good for analysing what works and what doesn't. If you don't keep track, then it's difficult then to plan ahead for future years. And I know many entrepreneurs that hate all the spreadsheets and the tracking process, but getting into those simple habits of tracking what you're doing can really make a significant difference to your organisational success. It will save you time and it'll bring in the income that you need if you're organised. By getting into simple habits of tracking your funding and tracking your outputs and what you do and your feedback, that gives you the opportunity to then feedback and report and understand how successful you are, which then, once you understand it, you can communicate that to your funders, to your sponsors, to your customers, beneficiaries, and then that increases opportunities year on year. You can showcase what you do, and that creates more opportunities. So remember, this is a framework, it's not a rule book. So you may choose to have a different mix, that's fine, it's entirely up to you. This is just simply to help you inspire your ideas. So let me know in the comments where you are right now. Are you just at the idea stage? Have you just registered and not really sure where to go? Already running and you've got a great funding plan? That's great, and I'm happy for you. If you found this helpful, then please like and click subscribe, and that helps YouTube to know that this is useful for other social entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs just like you. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.